Hi, I'm Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about the stories of Theresa Knorr and Joseph Fritzl. They were both serial killers and torturers who targeted their children as their victims. Starting with Theresa Knorr. She was viewed as one of the most abusive and torturous mothers in history, and you'll see why after hearing about her story. Theresa was born on March 12, 1946. She'd fallen in and out of several marriages. Her first marriage starting at the age of 16. She was known to get married and throw her husbands away like they were almost nothing to her. Theresa Jimmy Knorr was a murderer and a torturer. She had 2+ victims, and those victims were her children. She also used her other children to cover up for the crimes that she had committed. Although she didn't murder all of her children, the ones that she didn't murder, she abused awfully. She also murdered her first husband that she ever married at an extremely young age. The children that she did not end up killing, she severely abused. Her first crime. Theresa married her first husband at the age of 16. His name was Clifford Clyde Sanders. Theresa married at such a young age because she was in such a dark spot due to the fact that her mother died, and her mother was one of the only people that she looked up to. So she wanted to confide in somebody else, so she just married this man, Clifford Clyde Sanders. The two of them had a child together when she was around 17 years old, and it was recorded that the couple was constantly arguing. While they were living in California, the fights got so bad that Sanders wanted to leave, and when he tried to leave, Theresa shot him right in his back, leading him straight to death. She was immediately brought to court because everybody thought that she was a murderer, but she stated that he was coming at her trying to attack her, and this shooting was an act of self-defense, so she never got sentenced to any time in jail because the court ended up believing her. Her second crime. After all of the marriages that Theresa had been through, she was left with 6 children from each of the husbands. She became extremely fed up with this duty that was placed upon her, having to take care of this many children when she was so mentally unstable. Her first crime that she committed against her children was on her daughter Susan. Some background information on Susan. She believed that Susan had been cursed with this spell, and she wanted nothing to do with Susan, so she would abuse her, lock her in closets, physically, verbally, mentally abuse her, and one day the abuse got so bad that Susan was on the verge of death, and Theresa wanted to discard of her body and fully kill her. This is how she did it. Her and her son took Susan to nearby mountains and doused her body in gasoline and burned her body, and then put it in a bag and discarded it on the side of the street. In our textbook, it was stated that her body was charred beyond recognition. Theresa's third crime. Theresa's third victim was her other daughter, Sheila. Theresa had no reason for committing this crime. There was no spell that she thought that was put against Sheila. She just believed that she wanted her to die. She had locked Sheila in a closet without feeding her or giving her any necessities to survive. She died of starvation and dehydration a few days after being locked in that closet. This is such a abusive relationship that Theresa had. Her and Sheila died almost 3 days after she was locked in this closet. Aside from the 3 murders that she committed, there were other crimes involved as well, these crimes being the abuse that she inflicted on her children. She would throw knives at them, slap them, punch them, and force-feed them due to the fact that she was jealous of their beauty. It was noted that as Theresa's life went on, she constantly was gaining weight due to the fact that she was dealing with what she was dealing with. And her daughters were all so beautiful, and she was so jealous of their beauty that she force-fed them so they could gain weight just like she had. In our textbook, it was stated that the children could do no right by their mother. What was Theresa's diagnosis? There was none, except for the fact that psychiatrists had talked about her situation after, and they had all agreed that there was no other explanation for what she did besides psychosis. It was also noted that Theresa did not receive any treatment for the suspected psychosis. How Theresa finally got caught. Theresa was finally brought to court in 1993. She was brought to trial and sentenced to life in prison for the 3 murders against her first husband and 2 children. The judge had sentenced Theresa The judge that had sentenced Theresa had spoken upon her murders and stated that they were callous beyond belief. Now we're looking at Joseph Fritzl. Joseph's childhood and life as a young adult can be viewed to some as a mystery. He was so smart and in the way that he did things that he wanted everything to be a secret. So when people tried to research his life later on, everybody realized that they couldn't find anything because of how secretive he was. But it was stated that Fritzl grew up in Austria during when the Nazi era was taking place. I personally think that this could possibly be one of the reasons as to why he was so malicious, because he grew up in such a time of chaos in Austria. During Joseph's childhood, one of the individuals who he looked up to most was his mother. Although his crime lasted for 24 years straight, at the height of the crime, he was 73 years old. His main target for his crime was his 18-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. Joseph was extremely smart when it came to building things and putting things together, and this is what had led to his crime, which you all see later on, but he was described as having an incredible mind. So, what was Joseph's crime? His main target was his daughter Elizabeth, who was 18 years old. He had drugged her. Background story. He had built a bunker underneath his home. His whole family did not know that he was doing this. They just thought he was doing work outside. But for years, he was building this bunker underneath his house so he could eventually lock his daughter in it. So when the time came, when he finished building the bunker, he had drugged Elizabeth and dragged her into the bunker that was created underneath his home. His main goal revolving around this capture was to rape Elizabeth, impregnate her multiple times, so that he could have a clan of people with all of the same DNA as him. He almost wanted to create a cult. He just wanted to have children with just Elizabeth, his daughter, which is incest, so all of the babies could have the same line of DNA. Joseph would make few visits to this bunker each week, and when he did, he would give her food and the basic necessities that you need to live, but that wasn't enough for Elizabeth. And when he did visit her, he would rape her every single time. Because of how much rape he was inflicting upon Elizabeth, she obviously got pregnant, and he forced her to give birth on her own and walked downstairs and gave her very few tools that were needed to give birth. He barely gave her anything, and she had to give birth all on her own. One of her children that she gave birth to was born super sick, not a stillborn, but very near death, and Elizabeth begged her father to bring this new baby to the hospital, and he refused, so the baby died, and Joseph discarded of the baby's body and threw it somewhere, so he let this baby die when he could have brought it to the hospital and saved it. As his crime continued, he was constantly raping his daughter. After this rape that constantly occurred, Elizabeth ended up with 7 children, and she raised all of these children while living in this bunker underneath her home. Also, to add on, Joseph's wife had no idea that this was occurring underneath her home. She had no idea. She thought Elizabeth ran away, and Joseph was playing the worried father role or act, making it seem like he was so worried and that his daughter had gone missing. Fritzl did not provide his daughter with the necessities that were needed to raise these 7 children and this made the raising process so difficult for Elizabeth. But it was noted that she did the best she possibly could, and everyone was amazed by how she raised these children in such a small space with barely any necessities to live. This lacking care that Fritzl provided for the children caused Elizabeth to be so stressed out and struggle immensely. But he finally was caught for the crime that he committed due to the fact that one of Elizabeth's daughters got extremely sick at an older age when they were around a teenager, and she needed to be taken to the hospital. So when this daughter got sick, Elizabeth's daughter got sick, she was having liver failure, and she begged and begged and begged Joseph to bring this daughter to the hospital. He finally agreed, but he told Elizabeth's daughter, you need to keep your mouth shut about what is going on and do not tell a single soul. The second she got to the hospital, she told all the doctors about the horrid life that she was trapped in. Elizabeth ended up begging Fritzl to let her visit her daughter in the hospital, and he agreed to let her go. The second she got to the hospital, she found her daughter and then told doctors and nurses immediately that she was put into the hands of officers. They promised her children and her that they were safe and they would never have to see Fritzl ever again. Shortly after, Fritzl was taken by officers and sentenced to jail for life. He was charged with multiple things, those being murder for the firstborn infant, along with the charges of rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and slavery. Joseph's diagnosis. Joseph's psychiatrist, Kastner, had figured out a diagnosis for Fritzl after being in prison. She had diagnosed him with personality disorder and a serious sexual disorder. This is very clear due to the fact that he was constantly raping his own daughter. While in prison, Joseph is now receiving treatment for the disorder that he had been diagnosed with. So when we compare the crimes together, Theresa's crime and Joseph's crime, both individuals targeted their children to be their victims. Both individuals tormented their children during these times. Both individuals were convicted of murder. Both individuals committed these crimes for years with not a single person knowing, and both are sentenced to life in prison. Now, contrasting the crimes, what are the differences? Theresa committed her murders hands-on, and Joseph did not plan on murder, but when one of the children got sick, he let them die, which was a murder. Joseph's crime occurred for a longer period of time than Theresa's. Theresa's family knew about the crimes that she was committing, while Joseph did not. Theresa's family knew about them because all of Theresa's family at the time of the crimes were her children, and her children watched these crimes occur. Theresa did not take part in incest, while Joseph did. Theresa was married several times, while Fritzl only had been married once. And Theresa force-fed one child, and Joseph starved his. Although Theresa did starve her daughter Sheila in the third murder, but her main aspect was force-feeding her children because of her jealousy. And that's my presentation.